Good evening and welcome to From the AD's View. I'm your host, Dr. Cedric Brown. And as I do before every show, I'd like to give honor to God, who's the head of my life, because without him, nothing that I do is possible. Couldn't do this show, couldn't be a good father, a good husband, couldn't be a good professional, good colleague. So I want to do that. And let's bring in my very special guest, Dr. Sue Henderson. Dr. Henderson, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Absolutely. And Dr. Henderson, we spoke a little earlier about a couple of topics. And if you could give me a brief thought on this, what does it mean when I say positive impact of NIL and student athlete experience?
I think that that's going to be important for the students, for the institutions, but also for college sports.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Henderson. And then if I'm talking about what leadership looks like from a president's point of view or a chancellor's point of view or provost's perspective, what would you say about that, Dr. Henderson?
It's a one-word answer: mentoring.
Mentoring. That is absolutely remarkable. Mentoring. And these and more topics we will talk about, myself and Dr. Henderson will talk about on From the AD's View. Let's get it. Welcome back to the show. Again, you're watching From the AD's View. I'm your host, Dr. Cedric Brown. Let's bring back our special guest, Dr. Sue Henderson. Dr. Henderson, tell our viewers, tell our podcast listeners a little bit about Dr. Sue Henderson.
So I started my career as a high school teacher, and will never forget my third year of teaching. The principal came to me and said, Sue, you look like an athlete. Would you mind coaching gymnastics for us? And at the time, I didn't even know how to do it. And he said, well, we'll train you. So that was my first introduction to what it really means to mentor and to work with students. So we had a blast doing that. I did the gymnastics team. I did the drill team. Math team, and of course helped create some really good academic programs at the high school I was working. I moved on from there and taught at a community college because I got recruited into a community college, and this was in Georgia. And when I was there, someone came to me and said, look, we need somebody to be the department chair. Would you be willing to do it? And I said, sure, I can probably build a schedule. And realized at that point in time that I wasn't be teaching as much. I wouldn't be tutoring students as much. Or mentoring students as much, but my mentoring was to helping young academics, young faculty grow, and really had a blast doing that, and had an opportunity under a really good president, Jackie Belcher, to attend some sessions on leadership, and became a provost over a campus and helped grow that enrollment there really well. And knew I wanted to be in a four-year school, and ended up at Queens College. There I was the vice president of institutional advancement and did a lot of work in terms of helping to build buildings, build programs, connect with the community. And then finally, my last career job was at president of New Jersey City University, where we doubled the four-year enrollment, four-year graduation rate. We created a school of business and really grew our international program, as well as some really upgraded some of our general education and academic programs.
That is an outstanding career, Dr. Henderson. And, so many people don't understand that in the world of higher education, that there are, avenues and trajectories that you go through, right? And hearing your journey, you started out teaching, and then you go being recruited, and you go believing that you're going to continue that passion of teaching and mentoring, and then you get called in to leadership, because I'm sure Dr. Henderson, early on in your career, someone, that mentor, saw something in you that was needed to help the growth of the institution that you're around. And so being in higher education and being a part of athletics in your career, Dr. Henderson, what, the world of name, image, and likeness, right? If you go all the way back to UCLA and a case that was brought then by two brothers that played basketball in UCLA, and then now we come to 2023, where in the state of Utah, we have a collective that is leasing trucks for, one member of the athletics program. So we come far, far, far away, where I believe even Dr. Emmert, before he retired from the NCAA, where he thought, and now we have Mr. Charlie that's in there, and he's a former governor of Massachusetts, and a business person and things like that. What is the positive impact, Dr. Henderson, of NIL and the student athlete experience from your perspective?
So I'll share with you one of the senators in the state of New Jersey where I worked was very interested in making sure that NIL was possible. And her comment was, Sue, these athletes, we go on the weekends and we watch them play, or we go to their basketball games and watch them play, and we bring in great revenues. And those athletes don't get the benefit of all that revenue that comes in.
Yes, ma'am.
Nor do they get the revenue from any of the sponsorships. And for the amount of effort that these students, athletes put in, it's not proportional. So she really pushed for it, and I began to see that that's going to be an important thing. At the other side of it, with the NCAA, they said, we want to make sure it's managed.
Yes, ma'am.
As I pointed out earlier to someone, there are 500,000 student athletes across the country, just in the NCAA, and that doesn't count the NAIA. Of the 500,000, the vast majority of them are Division II, Division III, where they're not even given us scholarships. Division II gives some. You get to Division I, most of the Division I schools are the lower level Division I, and then you have the Pac-10, SEC, the ACC. And you know that with them, that there are athletes in there. They're very talented. I live in Colorado now, and I've began to see what wonderful things that Coach Prime is doing at CU Boulder.
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
been amazed at the amount of energy that's into the town and the amount of energy, but we have to manage it. So I think it's a good thing, but I think it needs to be managed. And I think bringing Charlie Baker on was a good idea, because he probably has enough clout federally to be able to get something put together with the Congress.
And in everything that you've said, Dr. Henderson, is so prevalent, even in, as I am an athletics administrator at the FCS level, we don't typically see the same type of NIL exposure that you would at the FBS level, right? What do you think that we need to do for our women athletes to make sure that they have equal access to these revenues that are coming through from these collectives?
So I'll share with you a little bit. I came along in college at a time when Georgia Tech had just begun to accept women.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
having women in athletics and having women even in colleges is not completely, it's not been around for a long time.
Yes,
I had
ma'am.
the privilege of working with a woman by the name of Gail Marquis, who attended Queens College, which is where I worked. And she was part of the first women's Olympics basketball, where they won a silver. And it changed her life. It absolutely changed her life, because she said, I learned discipline from this. But it also gave her a pathway to be able to play basketball. Now, she had to play it in Europe, because that was the only place where she could get it done. I think that the country's got to figure out how to bring women's sports at a higher level. The other sports I would think about is places like my son-in-law played lacrosse for Chapel Hill. Now he did
Mm,
get a scholarship, but he is probably not likely somebody in his position isn't going to be a NIL person. So
right.
understanding how we make that fair, or we just say this is the way it is, is something that we're going to have to work for. And athletic directors like you are going to have a complicated job. I really do, because your job is to take care of all the athletes,
Absolutely.
as well as
Absolutely.
the 10 really special ones.
Yes, ma'am. And I am a part of our Title IX committee for the institution.
Mhm,
I work very closely with my colleagues and wanting to make sure that the access is at a high level,
mhm.
right? And people say, well, is it equal or I said, no, it's not equal because, everybody that knows, how I grew up in the industry, looking at that one picture, Dr. Henderson, that has three people standing at the fence and they're all different heights and they all have different boxes, right?
Mhm.
It's not about the being equal. It's about the equity, the access to.
Yeah.
So each one of them can look over the fence,
Mhm.
but they all need something different to help them to
Mhm.
look over that fence. And I am a firm believer that the women of LSU basketball,
Mhm.
the women of Iowa basketball, the women of South Carolina basketball,
Mhm.
some of those student athletes, those outstanding women, are making millions of dollars in NIL, right? But
Mhm.
how can we do that for the swimmers? How
Mhm.
can we do that for the
Yeah.
volleyball players? How can we do that for so many other student athletes, track and field, cross country,
Mhm.
tennis? How can we do that for them as
Mhm.
well? Um, you have worked at several institutions and you've
Mhm.
held several different administrative posts.
Mhm.
Um, when you were sitting in those posts, what was important to you as the leader or one of the higher administrative leaders in the institution? What was important to you for your athletics program? Sitting as a president, sitting as a provost, what were you looking for to have be significant in your athletics program?
So one of the things that I always tried to do, whether I worked at the community college where we had a really good soccer team, or when I was at Queens College where I oversaw athletics as a vice president, or at NJCU where I was the president, I recognized based on the data what an impact athletics has on students. And the
Yes, ma'am.
model that athletics has is actually one that ought to be replicated, in my mind, across a lot of the other student services. How is it that those students get the support? So one of the things that we did both at Queens College and NJCU is tutoring for these students.
Sure.
We also were very attentive to their grades, and we got to where we were trying to do that with our students, our regular students, which is very important because you want to catch issues early on. And very often, the issue is not an academic issue, it's a life issue.
It
And
is.
trying to help them with their lives is what really makes a difference in the long run. But you only way you do this, someone always told me, you got to get the right people on the bus and you got to put them in the right seats.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I was very
That is
proud. Our
so true.
two great, really good athletic directors. China Jude at Queens College.
Oh,
She's
China
now out here.
Jude.
Yeah, she's now out here
Yes,
in Denver.
ma'am.
Yeah,
I
and
know
then
China Jude with the Denver
yeah,
the Denver Broncos. Yes,
Broncos.
ma'am.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other one was, oh gosh, his name slips me, but the athletic director we had in JC was fantastic, and he did so much to really rejuvenate and just change that athletics program. And it makes a
Yes.
difference. Leadership matters. It
It
absolutely matters.
does. It
So.
does. It does. And so, Dr. Henderson, stay with us. I have to go to a small break,
Mhm.
and then we'll be right back to talk about the rest of our topics. You are watching From the AD's View. I'm your host, Dr. Cedric Brown. We will be right back after this break.
Water. It's everywhere. We drink it, we bathe with it, we cook with it. Coffee's made with water. Toilets won't flush without it. It's used for washing clothes, dishes, utensils, pots, pans, floors, and our teeth. Plants and crops need water, animals drink it, and fish need it too. And don't forget, we can have a lot of fun in the water. Water. What will we do without it?
From the creative team that brought you The Browning Project and Dead by Morning comes a new thriller that will change the way you look at white-collar crime forever. Falling from the Sky.
I'm Leon Thomas with the Leon Thomas Group. Podcast, virtual events, webinars, streaming shows, and so much more. We want to be your partner in all things virtual.
Welcome back. You are watching From the AD's View. I'm your host, Dr. Cedric Brown. Before we bring our guests back today, I want to talk to everyone about my new book, How Black Men Overcome Racial Barriers and the Status Quo. It is an NCAA, in NCAA institutions. It's a narrative inquiry. The book, I wrote it as a dissertation and turned it into my book. And basically, it's covering how mentoring can help individuals to aspire to higher heights inside of athletics. And it's not necessarily something that is about how someone kept them back or held them down, but it's more like what mentors or what networks did you have that helped you to ascend to what you're doing, and whether they were perceived barriers or real barriers, how did it help you be successful? So in the upper right hand corner, you can see that there is a QR code. You can scan that QR code to get to the book, and the book is on Amazon.com. And if you go to that and get the book, love your support. If you'd like to contact me, you can reach me on my my own webpage. My website is cedricmbrown.org, or you can reach me on LinkedIn at Cedric M. Brown, PhD. My email is fromtheadsview@gmail.com. And if you like what you see, subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Cedric M. Brown. And can we bring back our special guest, Dr. Sue Henderson? And Dr. Henderson, you mentioned Miss China Jude. I've been had the opportunity to be around individuals like Mrs. Golf, who's a pioneer in women's athletics. Miss Yao, who is, definitely a pioneer in it. I work with a young lady who is a pioneer. Miss Marie Tuitt is a pioneer in women's athletics. In your coming through, we know in 1972 was big for higher education, big for our women, giving our women an opportunity to have access to. As you've worked throughout your career, Dr. Henderson, how have you seen things change from where they were to where they are? And we still have a long way to go, right? 50 years, we're still not where we need to be at. But how have you seen things advance over the course of your career?
So I think two things. And you talked about the fact that with Title IX, women started being able to be involved in athletics. There's a lot of data that shows the women who were in the athletics programs starting in the 70s in college, actually more of them ended up being leaders in industry and in their respective businesses. So
Yes,
it provides leadership. The thing is true, and this is why I think NIL is going to be important, is the comment that I've heard many people say is, who are the athletes on the field? If the athletes on the field are all people of color, then they need to have the leadership opportunities to become those titans of industry.
Yes,
and I think that athletics has done that. I'll also say that the military has done that. My brother's a West Point grad, and he attended West Point at a time when his superior officer was a woman. He also graduated. His roommate was Black, so he had the opportunity to work with a much more diverse population than some other people in other places. And I think it's made a difference in his life. He spent his career actually working in Africa because it was important to him. So
that is amazing. That's outstanding. And thank you, sir, for your service. If once the show is aired, thank him for the service. Dr. Henderson, again, you have held multiple positions in higher education. What does that leadership look like for you? And in our opening, we kind of tease it a little bit. What are you looking for as a president when you hire an AD? When a AD comes to you and says, "Hey, I have an outstanding coach candidate for our men's basketball program, who's our signature program, or our football program." What are you looking for when you want to hire leaders as a president?
Yeah. So coaches have the difficult job, in my mind, of not only being good coaches, so they need to know their sport, but they need to be good managers. They also need to be psychologists because they need to be able to work with the athletes. So much of what you do in athletics has to do with not only how you're performing, but how you're feeling.
Yes,
what is behind what you're doing every day. And again, I think this is something that the rest of higher education could learn from the athletics department, is that you work with a whole person. And that, to me, their health, their mental health, as well as their athletic prowess, and as well as how smart they are, how well they understand things. So all of those things are important. So being a coach is a complicated job, and not for nothing, it's a little political too. So you have to deal with everybody on the sidelines who would like to tell you how to do it.
the sideline quarterbacks, or the sideline coaches that think they have the best press break.
Absolutely.
For the program. You have Georgia State is now a Division I program in FCS. As I looked at your bio, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Henderson, that your advanced degree is from the University of Georgia.
That's correct.
Bulldogs, right? Bulldog number one in the country right now in the FBS. Yes. College football postseason tournament. And has it been different for you working in what would be an FCS school? Yeah, I know Georgia State at one point in time was Division II, and then being a part of as you go through your advanced degree at an FBS school, what are some of the differences that you saw as a leader of those institutions?
So I'll share with you what one of my colleagues said to me. I've always been a vice president or a president over a Division II or Division III institution. Yes, and so those are the only two institutions. However, when I was on the NCAA board, I got to meet the president of Cal State Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things she talked about, she said, we have a lot of athletes. We are very proud of our athletics programs. We're proud of our football, but we're proud of all of our programs. And because of where we are, we don't get the same support, nor are our voices heard sometimes when we're discussing important things in Division I. So it is going to be important, I think, as they move through the NIL, that they think about how do we structure the NCAA so that all the voices are heard. Because there are a lot of schools that are not the Pac-10s or the SECs. So
yes, ma'am. And with schools moving from conference to conference, and now there's in the courts, there's a big fight right now with Washington State, and I believe I think it's Oregon State that are still in the Pac-12, right? They want to be the holders of the purse, right? But all the other ones that have left are saying, hold on, not so fast, my friend, Lee Corso, right? Not so fast, my friend. They want to, still have a piece of the Pac-12 money right now. And I don't think that if you leave, I think you need to leave it there so that the individuals, the student athletes that are still there can have, their piece and they can have their opportunities.
Frankly, I think some of the reasons some of those schools left is because they jumped to other conferences where it was more lucrative. So yes, they should leave the money that's there.
TV money is a big thing. It is. Absolutely. And I just wanted to. We are watching From the AD's View. I'm your host, Dr. Cedric Brown. You can catch us here on each Sunday evening at 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern, and we are talking here with our special guest, Dr. Sue Henderson, a pioneer in her own right in higher education. Has a great wealth of experience in that and in athletics for student athletes. Before we go, Dr. Henderson, I like to always ask my guests one final question. And I don't try to get too heavy in the subject, but I just like to know. Dr. Henderson, what does faith or spiritualness or spirituality mean to you?
So I think it's what gets you up every day. It's what keeps you going when everything else is not working well. And one of the things I've been privileged to do when I worked in New York and in New Jersey is understanding that faith is expressed in different ways, depending on what culture you come from or what background you come from. But that we all have a faith that is our inner core that just gets up every day and says, you can make a difference in life. And I think it's your faith that does that and says, you need to keep going because this is your purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is very well said, Dr. Henderson. And Dr. Henderson, if I know that you are probably, mentoring and networking and consulting because that wealth of information that you have needs to be shared. And if someone wanted to get in contact with you, Dr. Henderson, how could they go about doing that?
You could find me on LinkedIn. So I think it's Sue E Henderson.
Yes, ma'am. And I affectionately say to everybody that wants to hear, me talk about it. I think that LinkedIn, that God said, I want a social media page. And he did that because everyone that I've come in contact with through LinkedIn has been like individuals like yourself, Dr. Henderson, very giving and open to share experiences, to be someone that talks about how faith is an experience for someone to help them to be that better version of themselves and to help them to understand people and accept people. And so I just, I'm so thankful that I had an opportunity to meet you on LinkedIn and that it has led to an opportunity for me to grow with what you're sharing with me, and hopefully that I've poured into you as well. But I really do appreciate you, Dr. Henderson, so much. And then, are there any last things that you would like to say before we close out?
No, Cedric, you just keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a privileged position, and you're doing a great job. You should be proud.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I'd like to thank Dr. Sue Henderson for being a part of our show today. It was an amazing, and we will cross paths again. I'm sure we will. We will cross paths again. And as I close the show, I again want to thank Dr. Sue Henderson for being a part of the show. And as I think about things that have gone on in the last week, I imagine that some of the experiences that I've had have led me to the point in my career that I have that I'm at now. And as I talk to some of my colleagues at work, those that report to me and those that I report to, the sharing of ideas and the sharing of responsibilities for a common goal, that we are there to be servant leaders for our stakeholders, which are our student athletes. It is an amazing feeling to come together when you share opportunities and you share ideas, and then those ideas go to fruition that helps the students be more successful, right? Two things that athletics is all about, two words: student success. And as long as we are doing that, and as long as that goal is in mind and that focus is centered and concentrated, we will always be on the right path of getting things done. And as I say all the time, we here at From the AD's View, we're here from 6:30 Central, 7:30 Eastern on every Sunday evening, trying to bring you more open and honest discussions from our view, from the AD's view. Good night, and God bless.